The message arrived at 3 in the morning, Earth time. Tae-1 was already awake. He had not slept well in months, not since the reports started coming in about growing unrest among the alien coalitions. When the soft chime of his communication device broke the silence of his small apartment, he knew before reading it that something bad had finally happened. He picked up the thin glass screen and read the words slowly. The Galactic Assembly had called a formal hearing. Humanity stood accused of crimes against the galactic community. He had 3 days to appear at Station Orith to answer these charges. 3 days. Other species received months of notice for such hearings. Some received years. But humans got 3 days. It was not a mistake. It was a message. Tae-1 set down the device and walked to his window. Outside, the city of Seoul sparkled in the darkness, millions of lights from millions of lives. These people had no idea what was happening far above their heads in the cold spaces between stars. They did not know that their entire future might be decided in a chamber they would never see, by creatures they would never meet. He was 52 years old. His hair had turned gray at the temples, and his face carried lines from years of difficult negotiations. Before becoming Earth's ambassador to the galactic community, he had served in the military for 20 years. He had seen conflict. He had seen death. But nothing had prepared him for the politics of the stars. Humanity had joined the galactic community just 12 years ago. In cosmic terms, they were infants, the youngest species by thousands of years. Most of the 47 civilizations in the assembly had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. They looked at humanity the way an old man might look at a noisy child running through a quiet library dot the next morning. Tae-1 met with his aide at the embassy building. Her name was Yuna, and she was the best translator in the entire Earth diplomatic corps. She could speak 9 alien languages fluently and understand pieces of a dozen more. She was young, barely 30, but her mind was sharp and her instincts were good. She was already waiting when he arrived, her face tight with worry. She had received the same message. "They gave us no time," she said. "This is deliberate. They want us unprepared." Tae-1 nodded. He sat down across from her and placed his hands flat on the table. "What do we know about the charges?" Yuna pulled up files on her screen. 6 civilizations have filed formal grievances against Earth. The Kellan hegemony leads the coalition. They accuse us of reckless expansion into territories they claim were already marked. They say we have shown primitive aggression in multiple border incidents. They describe humanity as a threat to galactic stability. "The border incidents," Tae-1 said quietly. "You mean the times we defended ourselves when their ships attacked our colonies?" "Yes, but they have rewritten the history. In their version, we were the aggressors." Tae-1 closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered reading the reports from those incidents. Human miners and settlers, just trying to build new lives on distant worlds. Kellan warships appearing without warning. Demands to leave. And when the humans refused to abandon their homes, weapons fire, the humans had fought back. They had no choice. And somehow, this had become evidence of their aggression. "What else?" he asked. Yuna hesitated. "They mock us, Ambassador. In their communications, in their public speeches. They call us short-lived animals. They say our emotions make us unstable and dangerous. They claim we breed too fast and think too little." Tae-1 felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger, not yet. Something deeper. They fear us. Perhaps they simply hate what they do not understand. He stood and walked to the window of the embassy. The morning sun was rising over the city, painting the buildings in shades of gold and pink. So beautiful, so fragile. "Who'll stand with us at the assembly?" he asked. Yuna shook her head. Very few. Maybe none. The Veth Collective has shown some sympathy in the past, but they will not risk their position for us. Counselor Bren of the Orith Union might be convinced, but he is old and cautious. He will not stick his neck out for what he calls the short-lived ones. So we stand alone. We stand alone. Tay One turned back to face her. In his eyes, there was no fear. Only a quiet determination that had carried him through wars and losses and years of impossible challenges. Then we prepare. We gather every record, every piece of evidence, every testimony. We build our case with whatever time we have. Yuna nodded, but he could see the doubt in her face. Ambassador, the assembly is stacked against us. Many of those delegates have never even met a human. They know only what they have been told, and what they have been told is not kind. Then we will have to change what they know. For the next 3 days, Taewon barely slept. He reviewed footage of every incident between humans and aliens. He read transcripts of negotiations that had failed and treaties that had been broken. He studied the cultures of the species that would judge him, learning their values, their fears, their histories. Yuna worked beside him, translating documents and preparing materials. She was tireless, driven by the same fire that burned in him. They both knew what was at stake. If the assembly ruled against humanity, the consequences could be devastating. Earth could be isolated, cut off from galactic trade and technology. Human colonies could be abandoned to hostile forces. Everything their species had built among the stars could be destroyed. On the final night before their departure, Tae-One sat alone in his office. On his desk was a small object, something he had carried for years. It was a child's toy, a simple wooden figure carved in the shape of a person. It had been recovered from the ruins of the first human colony destroyed by alien forces. He picked it up and held it in his palm. Such a small thing. Such a heavyweight. Tomorrow, he would board a ship and travel to Station Orith. He would walk into a chamber filled with creatures who despised his kind. He would listen to their accusations and their insults. And then, if he was given the chance, he would speak. He did not know if his words would be enough. He did not know if anything could change the minds of beings who had already decided humanity was guilty. But he knew he had to try, for the child who had owned this toy, for all the humans who had died far from home, for every person on Earth who dreamed of a future among the stars. He would speak for them all. The ship was called the Resolve, and it was one of the finest vessels in Earth's small fleet. It was not large compared to the massive cruisers of the older civilizations, but it was fast and strong and carried its crew with pride. Captain Hana stood on the bridge as her ship cut through the darkness between stars, carrying the human delegation toward their uncertain fate. Hana was 45 years old, with short black hair and eyes that had seen too much. She had commanded ships for 15 years, ever since humanity first ventured beyond their home system. She had witnessed wonders that most humans could never imagine. She had also witnessed horrors. Tay-1 found her standing alone near the observation window, watching the stars streak past in lines of light. He approached quietly and stood beside her. "You should rest, Ambassador," she said without turning. "The journey is long, and you will need your strength." "I could say the same to you, Captain." She smiled, but there was no joy in it. "I do not sleep well before difficult missions. A habit from my younger days." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the universe flow past them. Finally, Hannah spoke again. "My grandfather died at Kepler Station during the first contact massacre." Tae-One turned to look at her. He knew about Kepler Station. Everyone did. It was the darkest chapter in humanity's short history among the stars. A peaceful research outpost destroyed without warning by Kellan warships. Over 3,000 humans killed in a matter of hours. The Kellan hegemony had called it an accident, a tragic misunderstanding. They had never apologized. I did not know, Tae-Won said softly. He was a scientist, an engineer. He helped design the first long-range communication systems that let us contact alien civilizations. Hana's voice was steady, but her hands gripped the railing tight. He spent his whole life trying to reach out to the stars. And the stars answered by killing him. I am sorry. The Kellen delegate who leads this coalition against us. His name is Vorm. Do you know what his father commanded? Tae-Won felt cold. The fleet at Kepler? Hana nodded slowly. The son of the man who murdered my grandfather will stand before the assembly and call us the aggressors. He will say, humans are dangerous. He will demand our containment. She finally turned to face Tae-Won. And you will have to sit there and listen without striking him down. Yes, I will. How? How can you bear it? Tae-Won thought for a long moment. Because striking him would prove everything he says about us. Because my anger, however righteous, would be used as a weapon against every human alive. Because the only way we survive this is by being better than they expect us to be. Hana studied his face. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her. She nodded once. Then I will get you to Station Orth. Whatever happens after that is in your hands. The Resolve arrived at Station Orth 2 days later. The station was enormous, a ring of metal and glass that orbited a dying star. It had been built thousands of years ago by a civilization that no longer existed, and it had served D as the meeting place of the galactic community ever since. Thousands of ships surrounded it, vessels of every shape and size, from dozens of different species. The human ship was directed to a docking port on the outer edge of the station, far from the central hub where the important delegates arrived. Another insult. Yuna noted it, but said nothing. There was no point in complaining. They were met at the airlock by a pair of station guards. The guards were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. They looked at the human delegation with something between curiosity and disgust. You are the Earth representatives, one of them said. It was not a question. We are, Tae-Won replied calmly. Your quarters are in Section 12. Low tier. You will remain there until summoned. Low tier. The bottom level of the station, where the air was recycled more times and the gravity was slightly unstable. Where the least important delegates were housed, Yuna stepped forward. Our delegation requests quarters appropriate to a full member species of the Galactic Assembly. The guard made a sound that might have been laughter. Humanity is not a full member. You are a provisional species. Your quarters are in Section 12. This is not a negotiation. Tae-Won placed a hand on Yuna's shoulder before she could respond. We accept the quarters. Thank you for your guidance. The guards led them through winding corridors, past dozens of alien species going about their business. Some stopped to stare at the humans. Others turned away as if the sight of them was offensive. A few whispered to each other in languages that Yuna could only partially understand. Their quarters were small and cold. 3 rooms for the entire delegation. The furniture was designed for bodies shaped differently than humans, and the lighting was dim and green-tinted. But Tae-Won said nothing. He simply set down his bag and began to work. That evening, Yuna came to him with troubling news. She had intercepted communications between several delegations. The conversations were encrypted, but she had managed to decode fragments. Borim is planning something, she said, her voice low. He does not just want sanctions against Earth. He wants containment. Complete isolation. No human ship would be allowed beyond our home system. Our colonies would be cut off. We would be trapped. Taiwan absorbed this in silence. Containment. It was the galactic equivalent of a death sentence. Without access to resources from their colonies, Earth would slowly starve. Without trade, their technology would fall behind. Within a few generations, humanity would fade into irrelevance. Can we fight this? He asked. Legally, yes. We have the right to defend ourselves at the hearing. But the votes are already being counted, Ambassador. Vorim has spent years building his coalition. He has promises and threats and bribes lined up. The smaller species will vote with him out of fear. The larger ones will vote with him out of convenience. And the neutral parties? Counselor Bren? Una shook her head. I requested a private meeting with him. He refused. His aides said that the counselor cannot risk his reputation on, and I quote, the shortest-lived species in the assembly. Tae-Won stood and walked to the small window of their quarters. Outside, he could see a sliver of the dying star that the station orbited, red and angry, slowly consuming itself. Then we change their minds in the chamber itself, he said. We make them see us differently. How? They have already decided what we are. Tae-Won turned back to face her. In the dim light, his eyes seemed to glow with quiet fire. Then we show them what we can become. The assembly chamber was the largest enclosed space Tae-Won had ever seen. It rose upward in tiers of seats, each level holding hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy. Lights floated in the air like captured stars, and the ceiling was so high it faded into shadow. At the center of it all was a circular platform where speakers would stand to address the gathered representatives. Tae-Won walked with Una to their assigned seats. They were in the lowest tier, so close to the floor that they had to look up at everyone else. Thousands of alien eyes watched them as they took their places. Some of those eyes were curious. Most were cold. The high speaker entered last. His name was Mole, and he was ancient even by galactic standards. His species had been traveling between stars when humanity's ancestors were still learning to use fire. He moved slowly to his elevated podium, his long robes trailing behind him, and raised one withered hand for silence. The chamber fell quiet. This assembly has gathered to hear grievances filed against the species known as humanity, Mole announced. His voice was thin, but carried easily through the vast space. 6 member civilizations have brought formal charges. The accused will have opportunity to respond. Let us begin. Delegate Vorim rose from his seat in the upper tiers. He was tall and broad, with dark blue skin and eyes like polished metal. He wore the ceremonial robes of the Kellen hegemony, decorated with symbols of conquest and power. When he smiled, his teeth were sharp. He walked down to the central platform with the confidence of someone who had already won. The chamber seemed to lean toward him, drawn by his presence. High Speaker, fellow delegates, we gather today to address a threat that has been allowed to grow unchecked in our galaxy. A threat that wears the face of innocence, but carries the heart of chaos. I speak, of course, of humanity. Vorim pressed a control, and images appeared in the air above him. Ships burning, stations damaged, bodies floating in the void. In just 12 years, this species has caused more conflict than any civilization in the past century. They expand without permission. They settle on worlds claimed by others. When confronted, they respond with violence. He pointed directly at Tae-Won. Their ambassador sits among us now. Look at him. Look at the primitive fear in his eyes. Look at the barely contained aggression. This is what humanity is. Animals pretending to be civilized. Laughter rippled through the chamber. Tae-Won felt Una stiffen beside him, but he kept his face calm. Vorim continued. They live such short lives. 80 years, perhaps 90 if they are lucky. What wisdom can grow in such a brief span? What patience can they learn? They are born, they breed, they die. That is all they know. They do not plan for centuries. They barely plan for decades. They are driven by the desperate hunger of creatures who know they will soon be gone. More laughter. Some delegates made gestures of agreement. And their emotions. Vorim's voice dripped with disgust. They feel everything so intensely. Love, hate, fear, joy. They are slaves to their feelings, unable to control themselves. One moment peaceful, the next violent. One moment friendly, the next hostile. How can any civilization trust a species so unstable? A delegate from another species stood up. The Callan representative speaks truth. Humanity is dangerous. Their emotional nature makes them unpredictable. I have seen humans weep at the sight of a sunset. I have seen them laugh at funerals. They do not respond to the world as rational beings should. More delegates joined in. One by one, they rose to add their voices to the condemnation. Their art is noise. Random sounds they call music. Splashes of color they call painting. It reflects their chaotic minds. Their religions number in the thousands. They cannot even agree on basic truths. How can they be trusted in matters of galactic importance? They breed too quickly. Given time, they will swarm across the galaxy like insects. They are predators. They eat the flesh of other creatures. Savages dressed in suits. The insults grew worse. Some delegates made theatrical shows of disgust, covering their sensory organs as if the very presence of humans was offensive. Others laughed openly, pointing at Taewon and Yuna as if they were exhibits in a zoo. Yuna's hands were shaking. She gripped the armrests of her seat so hard her knuckles turned white. "Ambassador," she whispered, "we must respond." "Not yet," Taewon said quietly. "Let them finish. How can you sit there and listen to this?" "Because every word they speak tells me who they are. And when I finally speak, I will know exactly what to say." The accusations continued for hours. Delegate after delegate rose to condemn humanity. They brought up every incident, every conflict, every misunderstanding. They twisted the truth until it was unrecognizable. They painted humans as monsters, as threats, as a disease that needed to be contained before it spread. Through it all, Taewon sat still. His face showed nothing. Inside, something burned hotter than any star. But he would not let them see it. Finally, when the last accuser had spoken, High Speaker Mole turned his ancient eyes to the human delegation. "The accused may now respond. Ambassador of Earth, do you wish to speak?" The chamber fell silent. Thousands of eyes turned to Tae-One. He could feel their contempt, their amusement, their certainty that nothing he said could possibly matter. He stood slowly. "Not yet," he said. His voice was calm, measured. "The accusations have been many and detailed. I would hear them all before I respond. Are there more who wish to speak against humanity?" The chamber murmured in surprise. This was unexpected. Accusers usually rushed to defend themselves. But this human was asking for more condemnation. A few more delegates rose, adding their grievances to the pile. Tae-One listened to each one, nodding slightly, as if taking notes. When the last one finished, he looked around the chamber with an expression that was impossible to read. "Is there anyone else?" He asked. Silence. "Then I will speak tomorrow," Tae-One said. "I ask the Assembly's patience. What I have to say will require preparation." High Speaker Mole hesitated, then nodded. "The Assembly will reconvene at the next cycle. The human representative will have his opportunity." As the delegates began to file out, many of them laughing and joking about the weak humans and their delay, Vorim approached Tae-One directly. "You delay because you have nothing to say," Vorim said, his metal eyes gleaming. "Tomorrow will change nothing. Your species is finished." Tae-One looked up at him without fear. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "you will learn what humans say when we finally choose to speak." The assembly chamber was even more crowded on the second day. Word had spread that the human ambassador had delayed his response, and curiosity had drawn delegates from across the station. They filled every seat and lined the walkways, eager to witness what they expected to be a humiliating failure. Tae-1 entered the chamber with Yuna at his side. He walked with measured steps, neither rushing nor hesitating. In his hand, he carried a small bag. The delegates watched him with the hungry eyes of predators waiting for their prey to stumble. "Hi," Speaker Mole called the session to order. "The human representative has requested time to respond to the charges against his species." "Ambassador, you may take the floor." Tae-1 walked down to the central platform. He climbed the steps and stood in the exact center, surrounded by thousands of beings who despised him. He looked up at the towering tiers of seats, at the floating lights, at the vast ceiling that disappeared into shadow. Then he began to speak. "Yesterday, I listened." His voice was quiet but clear, reaching every corner of the chamber. "I listened to hours of accusations. I listened to insults. I listened to laughter. I asked if there was more, and I listened to that too. Some of you probably thought I was afraid to speak. Some of you probably thought I had nothing to say." He paused, letting the silence grow. "I was not afraid, and I have much to say. But first, I wanted to hear everything. I wanted to understand the full weight of what you think of us. Now I do." He began to walk slowly around the platform, looking up at different sections of the chamber. "You call us violent. You show images of conflict and blame us for blood spilled in the darkness between stars. You speak of border incidents where humans fought against alien forces. You do not mention that those incidents began when your ships attacked our colonies without warning. You do not mention that our people were simply trying to survive." He stopped and looked directly at Vorum. "The Kellan hegemony speaks loudest against us. They call us aggressors. But 17 years ago, before humanity had ever traveled beyond our moon, a Kellan fleet destroyed our research station at Kepler. 3,000 humans died in a single hour. Scientists, engineers, families, children. The chamber had gone very quiet. When we could have chosen revenge, we chose diplomacy. When we could have built weapons of war, we built ships of exploration. When we could have responded to your massacre with a massacre of our own, we buried our dead and sent ambassadors instead." He turned to face the wider assembly. "How many of you can say the same? How many of your civilizations, when wounded, chose words over weapons? How many of your ancestors, when betrayed, responded with open hands instead of closed fists?" No one answered. "You call us short-lived. You say we cannot develop wisdom in our brief years. Perhaps you are right. We do not have centuries to debate while innocents suffer. We do not have millennia to form committees while worlds burn. We must act quickly because tomorrow is never promised to us." His voice grew stronger. "But consider what we have done with our short lives. In just 12 years among the stars, we have established colonies on 40 worlds. We have developed new technologies that even the oldest civilizations now use. We have reached out to every species we encountered with offers of friendship and trade. All this from a people who barely live a single century." He looked around at the ancient faces watching him. "You have had thousands of years, millions of years. And what have you built? A chamber where you mock the young instead of teaching them. An assembly where you punish the weak instead of helping them. A galaxy where fear is stronger than hope." He reached into his bag and pulled out the small wooden toy. This belonged to a child. A little girl 6 years old. Her name was Somi. She lived on Kepler Station with her parents. She liked to play games and sing songs. She dreamed of one day seeing other worlds. He held up the toy for all to see. "Somi died when your ships opened fire. This toy was found in the wreckage. It is all that remains of her. Her body was never recovered. Her parents died beside her. Her songs are silent forever. The chamber was utterly still. You mock our emotions. You call our feelings a weakness. But it was love that made us reach for the stars. It was grief that taught us compassion. It was hope that kept us alive when your ancestors ignored our cries for help. He placed the toy gently on the podium. I have felt more in my 52 years than some of you have felt in 500. I have loved deeply. I have lost painfully. I have been afraid and angry and filled with despair. And I have found strength in all of it. Every emotion has taught me something. Every feeling has made me more, not less. He stepped back from the podium and spread his hands. We did not come to the stars to conquer. We came because we believed we would find family. We looked up at the night sky and imagined civilizations of wonder and wisdom. We dreamed of learning from you, of sharing with you, of building something greater than any of us could build alone. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, but somehow it filled the chamber. Instead, we found judgment. We found contempt. We found a galaxy so afraid of change that it would crush a young species simply for being different. He looked at High Speaker Mole. You ask if humans are a threat to galactic peace. I ask you, what peace? A peace built on fear and submission? A peace that demands silence from those who suffer? That is not peace. That is control. From somewhere in the upper tiers, a single delegate stood. It was Delegate Sorn of the Veth Collective. He said nothing, but his standing was a gesture of respect that then another delegate stood. And another, Counselor Bren, the ancient elder who had refused to meet with Tay-1, slowly rose from his seat. His old eyes were fixed on the human ambassador with an expression that might have been shame. More delegates stood. Not a majority. Not even close. But enough. VORM watched with growing fury as the chamber shifted around him. His coalition was cracking. The certainty of victory was slipping away. Tay-1 looked at the standing delegates and at those still seated. We do not ask you to love us. We do not ask you to trust us. We only ask that you give us the chance to prove who we truly are. Not through words. Through actions. Through time. He picked up the wooden toy and held it close. Give us the chance that Somi never had. The vote took 3 hours. 3 hours of counting, of arguments, of delegates changing their minds at the last moment. Tay-1 sat in the lowest tier of the chamber with Yuna beside him, watching the numbers shift on the massive display overhead. The motion to contain humanity had seemed certain to pass just 1 day ago. Now it was failing. Not by much. The margin was painfully small. But it was failing. When High Speaker Mole finally announced the result, a strange silence fell over the assembly. The containment proposal had been defeated. Humanity would remain free to travel among the stars. Vorim stood frozen in his seat, his metal eyes wide with disbelief. He had spent years building his coalition. He had called in every favor, made every threat, offered every bribe. And still, somehow, he had lost. He rose abruptly and stormed toward the exit, his robe swirling behind him. As he passed Tay-1, he stopped just long enough to speak. This changes nothing. The Kellan hegemony will withdraw from our treaties with your allies. We will not trade with any world that trades with humans. You have won a battle, Ambassador, but the war has just begun. Tay-1 looked up at him calmly. Then we will fight that war the same way we fought this battle, with words instead of weapons, with patience instead of rage. Vorim made a sound of disgust and left the chamber. Within hours, the Kellan delegation had departed Station Orith entirely. Their withdrawal from major treaties sent shockwaves through the galactic economy. Many delegates who had voted against containment now wondered if they had made the right choice. But Tae-Won did not care about the political calculations. Not yet. He had done what he came to do. He had spoken for his people, and his people had been heard. That evening, High Speaker Mole requested a private meeting. Tae-Won found the ancient being in a small chamber overlooking the dying star outside. Mole moved slowly to a seat and gestured for Tae-Won to join him. "In 400 years of leading this assembly," Mole said, "no one has ever silenced the chamber the way you did today." Tae-Won sat across from him. "I did not silence them. I simply gave them something worth listening to. You challenged everything they believe about themselves. You held up a mirror and showed them their own cruelty." Mole's thin fingers tapped against the arm of his chair. "Many of them will hate you for that, but some of them will think, and thinking is the beginning of change. Will it be enough?" Mole was quiet for a long moment. "I do not know. Your species is very young. You have made mistakes, and you will make more. But today you proved something important. You proved that humans can choose restraint over revenge. You proved that your emotions are not weaknesses, but strengths. You proved that short lives can carry long wisdom." He rose slowly, his ancient bones creaking. "The galaxy is watching you now, Ambassador. What you do next will matter more than any speech." Tae-Won nodded. "We understand. We will try to be worthy of the chance we have been given." The next morning, the human delegation prepared to leave Station Orth. Captain Hana was waiting at the docking port, her face unreadable as Tae-Won and Yuna approached. "I heard the news," she said. "We won." "We survived," T1 corrected gently. "Winning will take much longer." She nodded, understanding. "The ship is ready. We can leave whenever you wish." Before they boarded, Yuna pulled Tae-Won aside. Her eyes were bright with something between exhaustion and wonder. "Ambassador, I have been receiving messages. Hundreds of them. From alien worlds across the galaxy. Citizens are asking questions about their government's treatment of humans. News channels are broadcasting recordings of your speech. People who have never met a human are starting to question what they have been told about us." Tae-Won felt something. Warm bloom in his chest. Hope. A feeling he had almost forgotten. "It begins," he said quietly. "What begins?" "The real work. Changing minds one at a time. Building trust through action. Proving that we are more than they fear." They boarded the Resolve and took their places. As the ship pulled away from Station Orth, Tae-Won stood at the observation window and watched the massive station shrink behind them. So much had happened in that place. So much had changed. Yuna joined him after a while. "Can I ask you something, Ambassador?" "Of course." "During the accusations, when they spent hours insulting us, mocking us, laughing at us, how did you stay so calm?" "I was shaking with anger. I wanted to scream at them. But you just sat there, listening." Tae-Won was quiet for a moment, gathering his thoughts. "When I was young, my grandmother taught me something. She said that when your enemy wants you to scream, you whisper. It terrifies them more. I do not understand. They expected us to react with anger. They expected us to prove everything they said about humans being emotional and unstable. If I had shouted, if I had lost control even for a moment, they would have pointed at me and said, 'See? This is what humans are.' But by staying calm, by listening patiently, I denied them that satisfaction. And when I finally spoke, they had to listen too." Yuna considered this. "Your grandmother was wise." "She was. She lived through wars and famines and hardships I can barely imagine. She survived them all by refusing to become what her enemies wanted her to be." The stars stretched out before them, a vast field of light against the darkness. Somewhere among those stars were human colonies, human children, human dreams waiting to be fulfilled. Tae-Won reached into his pocket and pulled out the small wooden toy. He held it carefully, feeling its weight. "When we return to Earth," he said, "I want to build a memorial. A place where we remember those we lost. Not just at Kepler Station, but everywhere. Every human who died far from home, reaching for something greater. That sounds beautiful, and I want this to be part of it." He held up the toy, a reminder of what we fight for, of who we speak for. He walked to a small cabinet in the observation room and placed the toy inside, closing the door gently. "Somi," he said quietly, "I hope we made you proud." The Resolve accelerated toward home, carrying its small crew through the immense darkness. Behind them, the echoes of Tae-Won's words continued to spread through the galaxy. Changing minds, opening hearts, planting seeds that would take years to grow. The Assembly had expected humanity to crumble under their scorn. They had not considered that humans were forged by worse, and had learned to turn pain into fire and fire into light.